For all you casual players, the one green mythic you should probably look out for is Seasons Past, especially if you love EDH or Highlander. There are going to be all these grindy games when you're going to want all these cards from your graveyard in your hand. And the best thing about the card is it doesn't have some silly punishment like exiling itself. It just goes back in your library. Bottom line, this is definitely a card if you love long, grindy, casual games and you play green. It's probably not going to be too expensive. I think there probably could be some standard decks that do run it, but just because it just gets you all these cards back. But definitely get a copy or two if you can. If you just play casual, it's going to be good, and I know you will love it. Speaking of EDH, one thing that a lot of players miss is Primeval Titan because it was one of the best land tutors. However, we are fortunate enough to get another card that is also a land tutor in the form of a creature. And that's this big ugly Hydra. And yeah, I can see why you might be afraid of an Armageddon with this thing out. But hey, it tutors for a land, and that's something that we as EDH players have wanted at the same time, and at the same time to get a really big creature. And yeah, there's a lot of good things you can do with this card. And if you do play EDH, at least get one, or at least if you play EDH in green. It's a great card. I like it. It's going to be a lot of fun. It can see some play in standard, but it's probably not going to be too expensive. I'd wait till it drops from inflation just a little bit. But if you know that you want to try build brewing with more copies, you can feel free to get more. I'm personally just going to get one because I only really need one. But if you like cards like this and it's affordable to you, definitely get some. It's going to be good. And a lot of people are going to want it that play EDH because it's a creature that tutors for a land. Speaking of searching for lands and tutoring, I actually really like Transverse the Ulvenwald when it has Delirium. When it has Delirium, it's actually really awesome as it becomes a nice efficient creature tutor or land tutor. When it doesn't have Delirium, it becomes Lay of the Land. Did we really have to make Lay of the Land a rare? Is that really necessary? That just seems kind of painful. If you play a green deck that likes to run lots of graveyard synergies to like get stuff in your graveyard, this is wonderful. Other than that, good luck getting that Delirium, and I hope you enjoy casting Lay of the Land, or at least for the first few turns of the game, casting Lay of the Land. If you were a big fan of Voice of Resurgence back in Return to Ravnica block, I sure wasn't. But some people were, and there's actually a very similar creature that's coming out in this set called the Silverfur Partisan. While it probably isn't as broken as Voice of Resurgence, as it doesn't always trigger upon casting a spell, it will give you an additional wolf token if your opponent targets it with anything, or if you target it with anything. So the more you target it with it, the more stuff you'll get. This is nice because, unless your opponent has a board wipe, it's going to at least get you a 2/2. Although I don't really see why this guy has trample. I guess you can pump it by targeting it with stuff and getting more wolves. But I feel like it probably would have been better with something else. What? I don't really know. The point is, this will likely see play in green decks. I really like it. I know that cards like I said, Voice of Resurgence and Sprouting Thrynax have been playable, and I'm sure this card will be no different. It's a solid value creature, and it will see some play. And I feel like it may not go past Modern, but definitely in Standard it will see play. If this is affordable for you, definitely get it. And if you like token generators or decks that can generate lots of value from stuff, this is definitely a card for you. Next up, we have Green's version of I guess you can say a card advantage engine, because I know just about every color except blue had one in this set. It's the Tireless Tracker. And ironically enough, he has a landfall ability. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, you get to investigate and get a clue. However, the more clues you sacrifice and draw more cards, the bigger he gets. I really like this guy a lot. I feel like he will see some play. He's another great green value creature. I'm sure you can build a deck around him, but he's great because green, I love green cards that draw cards, and this is going to be one of them. You do have to pay for the clues, yes, but I feel like with the right amount of brewing, I feel like he could see a lot of play in Standard. Modern, I don't think he's unplayable in Modern, but I feel like his home is in Standard right now. And he's definitely a solid card, just kind of like the Bygone Bishop in white, and Prodder in red, and the Silent Visitor in black. I think those 4 cards are going to all see play in some shape or form in one Standard deck or another. I think they're all excellent cards, and he is no different. Definitely gets him if you can, and if you like green and like drawing cards. While we do have to kiss Rattleclaw Mystic goodbye, we are getting a new 2-mana creature ramp spell in the form of Deathcap Cultivator, and frankly, I don't think there is a better thing you can do to replace the Rattleclaw Mystic in this set. There really isn't any other ramp creatures that do something like this. Sadly, it's not the same colors as Rattleclaw Mystic, but it's still going to see some play, especially if you're going to be ramping into these colors. The Delirium is nice, but I don't think it's too necessary. I think people would still play this even if it didn't have it, but sadly, I think if it didn't have it, it probably wouldn't be a rare. Point is, if you're planning on playing Standard and you want to play ramp, this is a card you are definitely going to need. So if you want that, definitely get it. I'm not entirely sure what the price is right now, but if it's affordable for you and you like playing ramp and Standard, definitely get some. It's going to make your job a lot easier. Next up, I want to talk about Second Harvest. This is actually really interesting, as while we didn't get a reprint of Doubling Season or Parallel Lives, this is actually really neat, as you can clone all your tokens at instant speed, but a really cool thing is you can clone your clues as well. If you love tokens and like to play casually, I think this is going to be a swell card. If tokens becomes an archetype in Standard, this will probably be a very nice card to have. Probably not as a 4-of, but I think it will be at least a 1-of if that becomes a thing. It's a lot of fun, and I think you'll have a lot of fun with it. Although, if you do run a lot of Doubling Seasons and Parallel Lives, you may not need it, but hey, if you need an extra one, this is definitely something to check out and try. Now, I know I was talking about the Tireless Tracker and how he's a great way to get card advantage if he sticks around for long enough, but oddly enough, Green actually got a lot of cards that draw cards. The first one is the one I'm not too impressed with. It's the Sage of Ancient Lore, which turns into a big werewolf that has power and toughness equal to the number of cards in everyone's hands. I think it also has Vigilance and Trample. But the Sage actually draws you a card upon entering the battlefield, and it's basically a creature like Mark Rosewater. It has power and toughness equal to the number of cards in your hand. I'm honestly not too impressed with this. I don't think it's bad, but I think one thing that I'm actually do like, a card I actually am kind of surprised about, and I think is actually arguably better than this, is the Hermit of the Natternals. This actually punishes your opponent by making you draw cards whenever they cast stuff on your turn, and when it flips, it makes you draw more cards. This is actually really neat because this ability kind of plays a big mind game over when or when not your opponent should cast spells, and in turn, that kind of affects when the creature can flip. I think this is going to be a fun card for mind games. I don't know how playable it is. I feel like since it's getting you more cards, I'm sure it's something your opponent wants to watch out for. It's definitely a neat card, and I like it better than the bigger werewolf that only draws you a card when it enters the battlefield. Another werewolf I've really liked for a while, this was actually spoiled a long time ago, so I've known about it a while, is the Dark Watch Recruiter, and this is excellent, as it, technically speaking, also draws you more cards, or more creature cards at least, and it gets you the creatures that you could potentially need, and the flip side makes your creatures cost less. I mean, as if we didn't need that enough already. I feel like this is going to be pretty sweet in Animar decks, considering Animar wants to cast a lot of creatures and got all those nasty degenerate combos in EDH. I know a lot of decks that work that way. I think they would like a card like this. I think it could see play in Standard. It's not very expensive, it's efficient, it transforms into a pretty powerful creature, and getting your creatures to cost less is usually a pretty nice benefit. Definitely get some of these. If you play decks like these, you're going to love it. If you also like more werewolves, Howlpack Resurgence is a great tribal card, especially because you can drop it in anytime you like. If your werewolves got blocked, you just drop this immediately and they'll trample over everything. Definitely a staple for werewolf decks, hands down. Believe it or not, we're actually not done with green drawing cards. Green also has a similar card to Fecundity in the form of Uvenwald Mysteries, in which whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you will get a clue, and whenever you sack a clue, you get a 1/1 creature token. Since I'm a big fan of Fecundity, I use a lot of decks that use it, and this is probably not as powerful. You don't get the card draw immediately, but it's still really, really, really good. And honestly, if you need another card that's similar to Fecundity, I feel like this is the second best thing, because even if you don't draw all the cards immediately, you get benefits by sacrificing clues, and if there are lots of loops in which you can sacrifice lots of creatures in EDH, and you'll get lots of cards from Fecundity, but you'll also get a lot of clues from this. I guess the only downside about this is you'll need a lot of clue tokens, but nonetheless, if you like cards like Fecundity, this is an excellent card. Definitely recommend it. Definitely for an EDH player. Hands down, get it. Personally, I'm also a fan of Ultimal Gloom. If you can get this Delirium to trigger really early, you could probably get a really big hexproof creature out really soon. I feel like this is easily could be broken for Standard, and I don't really know about Modern. I feel like it's a little bit too tame at first. You really have to find ways to get to flip, but I'm sure there are ways, and I'm sure there are ways to build around it. Still, once you get that to flip, a really big hexproof creature is really hard to deal with. So be on the lookout for this to see some play. Next up, I want to talk about a common werewolf in the form of Hinterland Logger. I actually think this is actually really neat because it's actually one of the very few, there are some, but it's another sample of a kind of a 4-power creature with not a whole lot of drawbacks for 2 mana. If anything, the only drawback is it can change back, but there really aren't that many 4-power creatures for 2 mana. And probably the most notable one I can think of, even though it didn't really have 4 power to begin with, was Putrid Leech. But this, I feel like, is still pretty powerful. Although I don't think it's Putrid Leech powerful, I still think it's something to consider, considering it's kind of a milestone in the 2 mana creature with 4 power is kind of uncommon. Also, I feel like this card here was just meant to deal with Ojitai and Avacyn, and that's about it. Way to go, Green. Way to go, Green. Also, I mentioned Werewolf is absolutely delicious. I'm not kidding. You should try some. It's awesome.